What if I told you that your exhausting effort to be normal is the very thing making you miserable? You see, we've convinced ourselves that fitting in, that pressing our wild, curious souls into society's tidy boxes, is the path to acceptance. But here's the thing. Normal is a phantom, a collective illusion we've agreed to pretend exists. Think about it. The universe produces no standardized humans, only unique expressions of consciousness wrapped in skin and story. The most together people you admire? They've simply stopped the exhausting performance of normality. They've discovered what I'm about to share with you, that authenticity isn't found in conformity, but in the courage to be gloriously, unapologetically yourself. Normality might be the strangest concept humans have ever invented, a completely artificial standard that exists nowhere in nature, yet we chase it with such desperate determination. We pretend to be normal. We pretend to be fine. We pretend to know what we're doing. This peculiar game we play consumes our energy, steals our joy, and smothers our most brilliant potential beneath a blanket of acceptable mediocrity. The mask of normality, when worn day after day, year after year, begins to adhere to the skin. It becomes so familiar that we forget it isn't our face. The boundaries blur. The pretending calcifies into identity. You begin to believe that the performance is the person. Who taught you what normal is? Was it parents who themselves were taught to suppress their nature? Was it teachers who valued compliance over creativity? When exactly did you decide that your natural state, your authentic being, needed correction and containment? At what precise moment did you accept that your wild, wonderful uniqueness was something to be tamed rather than celebrated? I knew a man once. For 40 years, he wore polished shoes and pressed shirts. He laughed at jokes he didn't find funny. He nodded at opinions he didn't share. He built a life that looked impressive from the outside but felt hollow within. Then illness struck. Suddenly confronting his mortality, he realized with startling clarity that he had spent decades performing a role rather than living a life. In his final years, he shed the pretense. He spoke his truth. He followed his curiosity. The people who truly mattered stayed. Some even drew closer, relieved to finally meet the real person behind the performance. You see, our fear of being seen as abnormal stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of our nature. We are not standardized products rolling off an assembly line. We are more like trees in an ancient forest, each shaped by unique combinations of sunlight and soil, wind and water. A forest thrives precisely because of its diversity. No two trees identical. No two leaves exactly the same. Yet we somehow decided that humans should conform to rigid templates, as if diversity weakens rather than strengthens us. The cost of this pretending is immense. It manifests as anxiety, depression, a persistent sense of alienation. The gap between who we are and who we pretend to be creates a tension that never fully resolves. Like holding a beach ball underwater, it requires constant effort. And eventually, inevitably, we grow tired. Now let me tell you something about this game of normal we play. It's rigged from the start. The goalposts constantly shift, the rules change without warning, and the prize, if ever attained, disappoints. Because the approval we seek through conformity is shallow and conditional. True connection, true belonging, comes not from hiding our nature, but from revealing it. Think about it. The people you feel most comfortable with, most alive around, are not those who perform perfection. They are those who have granted themselves permission to be fully human, gloriously flawed, refreshingly real. There are three primary masks of normality we wear: each more exhausting than the last. Three personas we adopt in our misguided quest to belong. Three costumes that, over time, begin to chafe and bind, restricting the natural expansion of our authentic selves. These masks promise protection, but deliver prison. They offer the illusion of acceptance while denying the reality of who we are. The first mask we wear is what I call the social performer. This is perhaps the most common and seemingly innocuous of the three. The social performer smiles at the right moments, laughs at jokes that fall flat, and nods in agreement when the heart silently protests. It is the you that shows up at dinner parties and workplace meetings, carefully calibrating reactions to match the expected emotional temperature of the room. You know this mask well. It's the one you wear when someone asks how you are, and you automatically respond with fine when you're anything but fine. It's present when you feign interest in topics that bore you, when you pretend to enjoy activities that drain you, when you manufacture enthusiasm for social obligations that leave you empty. The social performer has a repertoire of prepared responses, facial expressions practiced in mirrors, and a catalog of acceptable opinions on current events. I knew someone who spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder in finance. Each promotion brought more money but less joy. Each achievement hollow, each celebration forced. Yet when asked about their career, they would beam with rehearsed pride, speaking of fulfillment and passion that existed only in the script they recited. Their friends envied their success. Their family praised their dedication. No one knew they cried in their car before entering the office each morning. The performance was flawless, convincing everyone except the performer. But here's the thing about this first mask. The exhaustion you feel after social interactions isn't just introversion or age or lack of energy. That profound fatigue is your soul gasping for air. It is your authentic self drowning under the weight of performance. When we constantly monitor our words, police our expressions, and filter our thoughts to fit external expectations, we create an internal split that demands enormous psychological energy to maintain. The second mask is the emotional suppressor. While the social performer focuses on external presentation, the emotional suppressor works on internal control. This mask specializes in denying, miniaturizing, and redirecting your genuine emotional responses to fit within the narrow band of feelings deemed acceptable by society. The emotional suppressor tells men that grief should never bring tears. It teaches women that anger must be softened into disappointment. It instructs children that big feelings should be made small, manageable, convenient for others. This mask transforms the wild, flowing river of your emotional life into a carefully regulated canal. Controlled, predictable, safe. But emotions are like water. They cannot be permanently dammed. The energy of suppressed feelings doesn't disappear. It accumulates. It builds pressure. It seeks release. Have you noticed how small irritations suddenly trigger disproportionate reactions? How minor disappointments can plunge you into unexpected despair? These are not isolated incidents. They are the inevitable flooding that occurs when emotional suppression fails, as it must. What does it cost you to pretend serenity when you feel rage? What happens to your body when sorrow is swallowed rather than expressed? How much of your authentic connection with others is sacrificed when you present only the acceptable fraction of your emotional spectrum? The third and perhaps most dangerous mask is the self-denier. This mask represents the ultimate surrender to the illusion of normality. It occurs when you no longer recognize the difference between the role and the actor, between the mask and the face beneath it. The self-denier doesn't just perform normality. They believe they are the performance. This is the fish that has forgotten water, the bird unaware of air, the human who cannot perceive consciousness because they are completely identified with its contents. The self-denier has so thoroughly internalized external expectations that they experience these imposed limitations as their own natural boundaries. You can recognize this mask when someone cannot answer what truly brings them joy outside of socially prescribed pleasures, when they cannot name their own values separate from cultural defaults, when they reflexively reject parts of themselves that don't fit their accepted identity. The self-denier mistakes the map for the territory, the menu for the meal, the description for the described. The great irony is that those who appear most normal are often most disconnected from reality. Those who have most successfully adapted to artificial social constructs have strayed furthest from their natural state of being. They are perfect citizens of a fictional world, having forgotten the real one, from which they came. Now you might be wondering, what happens when we stop pretending to be normal? What exists on the other side of this exhausting performance? The answer might surprise you, because the liberation from normality is not chaos as we've been taught to fear. It is not isolation or madness or perpetual discomfort. It is, paradoxically, our most natural state of being. What if I told you that those quirks you hide, those peculiarities you suppress, those unique perspectives you keep silent are not flaws to be corrected, but gifts to be expressed? The very aspects of yourself that seem least normal are often the most authentic, the most direct expressions of your singular consciousness moving through the world. Let's explore what authenticity might look like in contrast to those three masks we wear. First, there is social authenticity. This doesn't mean brutal honesty that wounds others or self-indulgent expression without boundaries. It means selective vulnerability with those who have earned your trust. It means saying no without elaborate excuses when something doesn't align with your values. It means finding your people rather than trying to please all people. I have found in my own life that when I speak my truth without apology or exaggeration, the right people move closer while the wrong ones naturally drift away. This natural sorting process, which seems so frightening in prospect, actually creates connections of profound depth and resilience. When you show up as yourself, you attract those who genuinely resonate with your authentic frequency. The second aspect is emotional authenticity. This means allowing yourself to experience the full spectrum of human feeling without judgment or suppression. It means crying when grief arises, laughing without restraint when joy bubbles up, expressing anger clearly without harmful acting out. Emotions, when allowed to move through us rather than becoming stuck within us, are like weather patterns. They arrive, they deliver their message, and they naturally dissipate. Think of how children feel emotions, fully present, completely expressed, quickly released. A child can move from tears to laughter in moments not because they are unstable, but because they haven't yet learned to cling to emotional states as identities. This natural emotional fluidity is our birthright, one that most of us surrender to the altar of appearing normal and controlled. The third aspect is self-recognition. This is the practice of remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It means recognizing that your essential nature was present before any socialization, any education, any cultural programming. Like water that can become ice or vapor without changing its fundamental molecular structure, your authentic self remains intact beneath all acquired identities and imposed expectations. I once knew a woman who spent decades as the perfect mother, wife, and community volunteer. Her identity was so thoroughly wrapped in these roles that when her children left home and her marriage ended, she experienced what appeared to be a complete collapse of self. Who was she without these defining relationships? In the painful space that followed, something remarkable emerged. She began painting, a passion abandoned in childhood. She traveled solo to places that had always called to her. She spoke with a directness that sometimes startled others, but attracted new friends who valued her authenticity. What looked like breakdown was actually breakthrough. The water of her essential self, long frozen in rigid roles, had finally returned to its fluid state. Now, I recognize the fear that arises when contemplating such authenticity. What if I'm rejected? What if my true self is too strange, too intense, too much for others? What if the cost of authenticity is the comfort of belonging? These are reasonable concerns. Being your authentic self in a world obsessed with normality requires courage. But consider the alternative. Consider the cost of perpetual pretending, the chronic stress of maintaining appearances, the shallow connections that result from presenting only your acceptable surface, the haunting sense that if people like you, it's only because they don't really know you. The exhaustion of pretending costs far more than any rejection that might come from authenticity. You are not your job. You are not your role. You are not your mask. These are temporary conditions, contextual expressions, costumes worn for a time. They are not your essence, not your fundamental nature, not the core truth of who and what you are. But if you're not those things, what are you? Remember when I asked, what if your effort to be normal was making you miserable? We've explored the masks we wear in our desperate attempt to fit in, the exhaustion of constant performance, and the liberation waiting on the other side of authenticity. Now let me share with you the cosmic joke at the heart of this whole charade. What we consider abnormal is actually the universe's default state. Have you ever seen a normal cloud? A standardized snowflake? A tree that grows according to precise mathematical specifications without deviation? Of course not. Nature abhors uniformity. The cosmos delights in variation. The fundamental creative force of the universe generates endless uniqueness, never exact replication. Look closely at any natural system. Every forest is composed of trees growing in their own particular way, responding to their unique circumstances of soil and light. Every ecosystem thrives through diversity, not through standardization. The very laws of physics seem designed to produce infinite variety rather than conformity. The cosmic joke is this: we have inverted reality. We have taken the universal truth of radical uniqueness and labeled it abnormal, while elevating the artificial construct of standardization as normal. We strive for a state that exists nowhere in nature and feel shame when we inevitably fail to achieve it. The truth is both simpler and more profound. True normality is radical uniqueness. The most natural thing you can do is be exactly who you are, in all your glorious specificity. Your peculiarities, your idiosyncrasies, your strange and beautiful uniqueness are not departures from normality. They are perfect expressions of the creative principle that governs the entire universe. So perhaps it's time to stop asking, "Am I normal?" and start asking, "Am I authentic?" Am I expressing my true nature, or am I performing a role? Am I honoring my unique perspective, or am I parroting acceptable opinions? Am I allowing myself to exist as I am, or am I contorting myself to meet external expectations? I once sat with an elderly man in the final days of his life. He had achieved everything society defines as success: financial security, professional accomplishment, family stability. Yet as he faced his mortality, these achievements brought little comfort. What haunted him were the unlived aspects of himself, the creativity unexpressed, the adventures not taken, the love not spoken. His final words to me were not about wishing he had been more normal, more acceptable, more conventional. They were about regretting that he hadn't been more fully, authentically himself. Let me offer you 3 simple practices that might help you step away from the exhausting performance of normality and toward the liberating embrace of authenticity. First, begin to notice when you're performing rather than being. Become aware of those moments when your words, actions, or even thoughts feel scripted rather than spontaneous. This awareness itself is revolutionary. We cannot change what we do not first observe. Second, when you catch yourself performing, ask whose definition of normal you're trying to satisfy. Is it your parents, your peers, society at large, some internalized authority figure from your past? This questioning often reveals that we're still seeking approval from sources that may no longer be relevant to our current lives. Third, allow one abnormal aspect of yourself expression each day. Start small if needed. Speak a truth you usually keep hidden. Pursue an interest you typically suppress. Express an emotion you generally contain. Like exercising an atrophied muscle, this practice gradually builds your capacity for authentic living. Think about it. We have such limited time in these bodies, on this planet, experiencing this particular life. Each moment spent performing normality is a moment not spent exploring your unique potential. Each day devoted to fitting in is a day not devoted to standing out in the ways only you can. The cosmic clock ticks regardless of whether we live authentically or artificially. The only question is how we wish to spend the precious moments allocated to us. We began by considering that perhaps your exhausting effort to be normal is the very thing making you miserable. We now return to that insight with deeper understanding. The performance of normality isn't just personally exhausting, it's cosmically unnecessary. The universe never asked you to standardize yourself. Society's expectation of conformity runs counter to the fundamental creative principle of existence itself. Your authentic strangeness is not something to overcome or conceal or apologize for. It is your gift to the world. It is your unique contribution to the cosmic tapestry. It is the only thing you have that no one else can offer in quite the same way. What magnificent strangeness might you discover if you stopped pretending to be normal, even for just today?